Good morning. When I was a teenager, there were just a few conspiracy theories about. Perhaps the most prevalent was one that concerned the moon landings. Now, I've always been fascinated by the moon landings. NASA's Apollo program put 12 men on the moon between 1969 and 1972 in a remarkable feat of human imagination, teamwork and endeavour. However, within 4 years of Apollo 17, the last mission to land on the lunar surface, conspiracy theories about it had started. The claim that the moon landings were faked was started by a chap who had self-published a pamphlet in 1976. Among the facts that he used to back up this conspiracy theory were that you can't see any stars in the pictures taken on the moon. The real reason is to do with camera exposure times. That there isn't a blast crater under the landing module. It's actually not there because of the way dust behaves in a vacuum. And the fact that the shadows in the photos are a bit weird, which is really to do with the reflective qualities of moon dust. There were 382 kilos of moon rock collected from the moon, and there were around 400,000 people working at NASA over the period of the Apollo program. In 2011, NASA sent a reconnaissance orbiter around the moon which beamed back actual pictures of the landing sites, the footpaths left by the astronauts and the tracks made by the lunar buggy. Now you might be able to tell that I'm entirely convinced that the moon landings happened. I'm not as convinced though as the second man to walk on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, who, when he was 72, once punched a moon landing conspiracy theorist who hassled him about it. It is amazing to me then the number of people in this country who do not believe that the moon landings happened. I watched a hilarious clip from 2018 from This Morning in which the daytime TV show brought on a cosmologist whose role was to argue with a man who stated that you couldn't land on the moon because it was made of light and translucent on a major television channel 2 and a bit years ago. In a YouGov poll in 2019, 1 in 6 Britons said that the moon landings were probably or definitely staged. Now, the most interesting aspect of this poll is that the younger you were, the more likely you were to think that the moon landings were faked or may have been faked. This is more than a little worrying. A renowned expert on political extremism, Professor Michael Barkan, classifies conspiracy theories into 3 different types. There are event conspiracy theories, which are conspiracies that are limited to very well-defined events. There are systemic conspiracy theories, whereby a single, usually evil, group plans to penetrate major world institutions and manipulate them for their own ends. Finally, there are super conspiracy theories, where loads of conspiracies are all controlled by one all-powerful evil force. The psychology of conspiracy theories is fascinating. We talk a lot in today's world about various cognitive biases, which is where someone displays a tendency to deviate from normal or rational thinking. There are loads of different sorts of biases in how people can think, and conspiracy theories play on a lot of them. One bias, particularly useful in conspiracy theories, is proportionality bias, which is a tendency to think that big events must have big causes. One of the earlier of the conspiracy theories involved the assassination of the 35th US President, John F. Kennedy. People found it easier to believe that Kennedy was assassinated by the mafia, the CIA, or the Cuban government than by the lone, highly trained gunman Lee Harvey Oswald. A further bias used by those who support various conspiracy theories is confirmation bias, which is where someone searches for, interprets and recalls information that supports their pre-existing beliefs. So a believer in the conspiracy theory of alien spacecraft landing in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 will look at all the technological advances the US made in the subsequent years, things like Kevlar, stealth technology, satellites, and ascribe it all to reverse engineered alien technology. Another means by which people look to convince others as to the rightness of their wacky theories is by an appeal to emotion. A good example of this is the old flat earth conspiracy theory. This is one of the longest standing conspiracies out there. If you look out of your window, then the earth looks flat. When you walk or drive about on it, you don't notice a curve. So if it feels flat, then it must be flat. Flat earthers believe that the earth is not a sphere and instead a flat disc. They'll then ignore all the evidence to the contrary because it doesn't feel right to them. One of the peculiarities about conspiracy theorists is that they tend to really care about their theories. You don't join the flat earth society if you don't really believe in it. Most people don't really think about the big sphere we live on, and as such, those people who've spent a long time, some might say far too long, coming up with evidence that supports their theories can shift the views of others. This is referred to as minority influence, which occurs when a small group who passionately believe something influence a larger group as to the rightness of their ideas. This can have brilliant positive effects. Things like the women's suffrage movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries were views held by a passionate minority. Such was the strength of their convictions that women should have the vote that they shifted the view of the majority. There is quite a significant difference, though, between female suffrage and the idea the earth is flat. One is a human right, now fortunately shared by both sexes, and the other is, well, bonkers. Why then do conspiracy theories seem to be gaining traction across the world? The first theory I mentioned regarding the moon landings began to gain traction in the mid-1970s in America, a period after the 37th US President Richard Nixon had resigned after he was found to be breaking the law and using the mechanisms of the state to help him to win an election. This was known as the Watergate scandal. People were starting to lose faith in figures of authority. And if the president could lie to people, then surely other powerful groups could as well. If people trust those in power, then they are less likely to believe that those people are really giant reptiles who are engaged in a conspiracy to dominate humanity. If they don't trust them, then that particularly wacky conspiracy theory might gain a little more traction. Another reason for the growth in conspiracy theories is that it seems that feedback, rather than hard evidence, increases people's certainty when they are learning about new things. Beliefs are more likely to be reinforced by the reactions of other people as opposed to logic and reason. This means, according to the psychologist Louis Marty, that if you think you know a lot about something, even though you don't, you're less likely to be curious enough to explore the topic further and will fail to learn how little you know. This kind of behaviour is perhaps helped by the echo chamber of certain parts of the internet. The internet has been a phenomenal tool in helping conspiracy theories to grow in popularity. Think back to that confirmation bias, the one where you only select information that supports your ideas, whatever they may be. The dark corners of the web will have some evidence that will support the craziest ideas, and that confirmation bias can be seen in the way that conspiracy theorists will flock to sites that support their ideas. People like to think that they know more than others, and conspiracy theories allow those believers to feel that is true. There's a further phenomenon at play in which the belief in something is enough to apparently demand respect for that belief. These are my beliefs, and if you aren't respecting those beliefs, then you are not respecting me, and you are therefore a bad person. It's presumably this that led to the man who believed the moon was made of light ending up on a major UK TV channel at 11 a.m. in the morning. Respect is a wonderful thing. We certainly don't need to be mean to people that we disagree with, but we should certainly be happy to challenge views which seem absurd, especially when those views aren't presented as faith, but are instead presented as facts. If we attack an idea, we can often be accused of attacking the person, when doing so is not the same thing at all. Perhaps the scariest element, though, of why conspiracy theories might be growing in popularity is that they are publicised and manipulated by unscrupulous politicians to support their own ends, to agitate already angry people to support a hate-filled agenda, and to use resentment, fury and rage to bring themselves publicity and, it is hoped, power. When conspiracy theories become political, then they become not just kooky, but deadly. Anti-Semitism is perhaps the best example of a conspiracy theory that has led to hatred, violence and genocide. The evil and false notion that Jews were leading a global conspiracy that was behind both Germany's loss in the First World War and the Great Depression was at least part of the reasoning that Hitler and the Nazis used to dehumanize the Jews and eventually to murder 6 million people. Conspiracies aren't just a bit of fun, and I suppose that's why I worry we're seeing a rise in conspiracy theories today. COVID has led to a flurry of conspiracies. Perhaps the weirdest of these was that 5G telephone masts were thought to be causing the virus to spread, which led to scores of masts being burnt to the ground in the UK last year. The plandemic theory gives credence to the idea that this virus has been planted in society by some super evil group of people. Perhaps it gives people who believe it a sense of power to think that there's an evil group working against them, at least if the alternative is that COVID is a pretty random occurrence and that no one is actually responsible for it. So what can we do to combat conspiracy theories, COVID or otherwise? Well, we've got to talk about them. We've got to be wary of simple answers to complex issues. We should be distrustful of people who divide the world into good and evil groups of people. We should be willing to believe in coincidences. We should try hard to avoid confirmation bias, making sure that we follow people on social media that we disagree with, if only to see the other points of view that may exist. Perhaps most importantly, though, we should search for logic. We should look for arguments that are valid, sound, and consistent. We should be willing to use those arguments, kindly and respectfully, against those people who've fallen into illogical beliefs that can and will do harm. We should search for truth, not the easy answers. Let's finish with a prayer. It's the opening prayer of the Quran, which I think speaks to this issue quite nicely. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Praise be to God, Lord of the worlds, the compassionate, the merciful, Master of the day of judgment. You we worship, and of you we ask help. Guide us on the straight path, the path of those whom you have blessed, not of those who have incurred your wrath, nor of those who have gone astray. Have a great weekend and a wonderful half-term, whatever you may be up to. As a member of the Illuminati, I'll be removing my human skin and taking the chance to bask for a few days in my true reptilian form, alongside my co-conspirators, the Queen, Bill Gates, and Elvis. Thank you.